The desert had a sound of its own, a low hum carried by the wind, whispering through the canyons of New Mexico. For 14 months, Royce Barrett had lived beneath that endless sky, trading goods, learning words he once thought impossible to pronounce, and sharing firelight with the people who had slowly stopped calling him foreigner. But among all faces, one had changed his life forever: Fiona, daughter of the respected elder Tazi. Her laughter was as soft as wind through pine needles, her eyes dark as obsidian. Against every rule, against her Uncle Nolan's warnings, she had chosen him. Their wedding had been small, hidden under the stars, witnessed only by fire and silence. Royce thought peace had found him. Yet peace never lasts long when two worlds collide. It began with a rumor, a sacred place defiled, a silver talisman missing from the tribe's most revered shrine. The whispers reached Nolan Graves first. He had never trusted Royce, not for his pale skin, not for his strange tongue, and least of all, not for daring to touch Apache blood. When they came for him, Royce was repairing a broken saddle by the fire. The circle of warriors that surrounded him didn't need words. Their silence was a sentence. "You desecrated the spirit's ground." Nolan's voice cut through the air, sharp as flint. "You took what is not yours." Royce's hands trembled, not from guilt, but from disbelief. "That's a lie," he said quietly. "I would never." A blow silenced him. His tools scattered into the dust. From a distance, Fiona screamed his name, but the men held her back. She struggled, her cries echoing through the camp, pleading with her uncle to listen. But the council had already been summoned. That night, Royce sat bound beneath the moon, his wrists raw from the rope, watching shadows dance across the cliffs. The firelight painted his face in gold and blood. He thought of Fiona, of how she had taught him their words, their songs, their stories. He had tried to belong. He had tried to be worthy of her world. Now that same world wanted him dead. Somewhere beyond the circle of firelight, Fiona knelt before her father's tent, begging for mercy, her tears falling into the dust. The wind carried her whispers away, words of love, of faith, of desperate defiance. Tomorrow, the tribe would gather. The council would decide his fate. And in that moment, as the desert wind rose around him, Royce understood one thing: love was never enough when the weight of tradition demanded a sacrifice. The morning came in silence. A thin mist drifted above the canyon floor, and the smell of burned sage filled the air, a sign that the spirits had been called to witness what would happen that day. Royce Barrett stood between two warriors, his wrists bound, the ropes cutting deep into his skin. The people of the tribe gathered in a wide circle, their faces carved by the desert wind. He had faced many markets, many men, but never a moment like this. Before him stood the council, 5 elders in traditional garments, each holding a small carved stone, a symbol of judgment. Behind them, the sacred fire burned. Its smoke rose into the pale sky, twisting like a serpent between this world and the next. Fiona was not among them. She was forbidden to attend, locked away in her tent under guard. Yet Royce felt her presence, like a heartbeat he could not see but knew was there. Nolan Graves, her uncle, stepped forward. His voice carried authority, his words sharp as a blade. "This man," he said, "has lived among us under the guise of friendship. He took the trust of our people and spat upon it. The spirits of the sacred canyon have been violated. He must answer to the old laws." The crowd murmured in agreement, not out of hatred but fear. Fear of dishonoring the ancestors, of angering the unseen. Royce looked up. "I did not take anything," he said, his voice steady. "You all know me. I've traded fairly. I've shared your food, your stories, your nights by the fire." Nolan's eyes narrowed. "You speak well, white man, but words do not clean a soul." He turned to the elders. "The silver talisman of the mountain spirit is gone. It disappeared the same night he visited the shrine. Does coincidence hide guilt?" Royce tried to speak again, but the elder in the center old Tazi, Kiona's father, raised his hand. The air grew still. His face, once kind, now carried the weight of both love and law. The spirits demand truth, Tazi said quietly. But truth does not always come with words. There is a way, an ancient way, to let the spirits decide. A murmur rippled through the crowd. Everyone knew what that meant. The right of contest. A trial of faith, courage, and endurance. Few dared to invoke it. Nolan's face hardened. The contest is not for outsiders, he said. It is sacred to our blood. But the elder looked past him at Royce. He has lived among us. He has taken one of our daughters. If his heart is true, the spirits will protect him. If not, his voice trailed off into the wind. The verdict would come with the next sunrise. Royce would face the trials, 3 challenges, drawn from the oldest traditions of the Apache, and if he failed even one, his blood would fall upon the desert sand. As the crowd dispersed, Nolan approached him, leaning close enough that only Royce could hear. "You should never have come here," he hissed. "She will forget you. The tribe will remember only your shame." The sun was falling behind the red cliffs when the elders gathered once more. The wind had turned cold, carrying the smell of sage and dust. In the center of the camp, a sacred circle was drawn in the sand, marked with ash and stone. It was here the ancient rite would begin. 3 challenges, 3 trials of truth. The first would test the body, the second, the mind, the third, the spirit. Royce stood before the circle, his wrists now free but red and raw. His shirt was torn, his skin marked by rope and sun. Across the crowd, he caught a glimpse of Kiona. She had broken free from her guards, and now she stood beside her father, eyes glistening with fear and pride. Old Tazi stepped forward, raising his staff. "The right of contest has been spoken. The spirits will see if this man's heart is clean. If he fails, the desert will take him. If he endures, he will walk among us as one of our own." The first trial began. 2 warriors stepped into the ring with him, bare-chested, painted for ceremony. They were not his enemies. They were the test. Royce had to withstand their blows without striking back. Endurance, not aggression. The lesson of the body. The drums began slow, deep, like thunder rolling through the canyon. The first warrior struck him in the chest, knocking him to the ground. Dust filled his mouth. The second pulled him up by the collar and struck again. The crowd watched in silence, the rhythm of the drums rising with every blow. Royce staggered but did not fall. He stood bleeding, his breath ragged, his eyes fixed on Kiona. She was crying now, whispering his name, words lost in the roar of the drums. When it was over, he collapsed to his knees, but he had not fought back. The first trial was done. The second began at nightfall. They led him to the canyon's edge, where a small stone altar stood beneath the moon. Before him lay 3 sacred objects: a feather, a knife, and a bowl of water. He was told to choose one and explain its meaning to the tribe. The choice that would reveal his spirit. Royce hesitated. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying the whispers of the past. He thought of what Kiona had taught him, that water is life, that the knife cuts both ways, that the feather touches the heavens. He reached for the feather. "The knife divides," he said softly, "and water flows away. But the feather rises. It carries prayers to where truth lives." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the elder nodded. He remembers. The second trial was complete. As the crowd dispersed for the night, Kiona approached, breaking the rules of the rite. She knelt beside him, touching his face with trembling hands. "You can still run," she whispered. "They would never find you in the northern hills." Royce looked into her eyes. "And leave you behind?" He smiled weakly. "No, if I die, I'll die in the place you taught me to love." She kissed his forehead and slipped away into the darkness before the guard saw her. The dawn rose red, the color of blood and rebirth. A chill clung to the canyon floor as the tribe gathered for the final trial. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. Royce stood at the edge of the sacred cliffs, his body bruised and trembling. He hadn't slept. The memory of Kiona's touch still lingered on his skin, her words echoing in his mind like the fading rhythm of the drums. This last trial was called the Path of Shadows. It was not a contest of strength or wit. It was a walk into the unknown, a journey meant to strip a man bare before the spirits. Those who lied, those whose hearts were false, would never return. Old Tazi approached, his staff glowing with the soft orange light of sunrise. This path is not walked by the body, he said. It is walked by the truth within you. If you have hidden lies, they will devour you. If you are pure, the spirits will show you the way back. Royce nodded slowly. And if I return, then you will no longer be a stranger. The elder drew a line of white ash across Royce's forehead, a mark of surrender to the spirits. Without another word, Royce stepped into the canyon alone. The world around him changed. The sound of the tribe faded, replaced by the whisper of the wind and the cry of distant eagles. The sun burned low, and the rocks seemed to shift and breathe. He walked deeper, his shadow stretching long behind him. Visions began to stir in the corners of his mind. He saw flashes of his past, the trading posts, the faces of men he had cheated to survive, the gold coins slipping through his hands. He had come to the Apache lands not for peace, but for profit. That truth now clawed at him like fire under his skin. He fell to his knees, clutching the dust. I'm not that man anymore, he whispered to no one. She changed me. I learned your ways. I found meaning. The wind howled in response, carrying a voice that was not his own, deep, ancient, and cold. Truth cannot be learned. It must be lived. Royce lifted his head. A figure stood before him, not of flesh, but of shadow and light, half man, half spirit, the guardian of the canyon. Its eyes burned like coals. You seek to be one of them, the spirit said, but your heart carries the stain of greed. Why should their gods accept you? Royce's voice shook. Because love made me honest. Not perfect, just honest. The spirit studied him for what felt like an eternity. Then it pointed toward the rising sun. Then walked toward it. If you speak the truth, it will not blind you. Royce rose, breathing hard, the first light of morning spilling across the canyon walls. He stepped forward, each pace burning into his soul. Behind him, the shadows dissolved. Ahead, the sound of drums returned. The spirits had not taken him. The path had given him back. When Royce emerged from the canyon, the sun was already high, bathing the red cliffs in light. Dust clung to his clothes, his steps heavy but certain. The tribe stood waiting, their faces silent masks of expectation. He crossed the sacred circle and stopped before the elders. The drums had ceased. Even the wind was still. Old Tazi looked upon him with a mixture of awe and disbelief. You returned, he said softly, as if speaking to a ghost. Royce bowed his head. The spirits showed me my truth. I came here as a traitor, but I remain as a man who belongs not by blood, but by heart. Before the elder could answer, a voice broke through the crowd. Nolan Graves, his face burning with rage. Lies, he shouted. He fooled the spirits just as he fooled us. The proof of his crime still lies hidden. He stormed toward the sacred fire, pulling from his coat a small silver talisman, the same one that had been declared stolen. Gasps spread through the crowd. Royce's eyes widened. He knew that piece. He had seen it in Nolan's tent weeks ago, when he'd been repairing a broken spear. Tazi rose to his full height. You bring the sacred token to accuse another. How did it come into your hands? Nolan hesitated. His mouth opened, but no sound came. The people murmured, suspicion spreading like wildfire. Tiona stepped forward, her voice clear and trembling. I saw it, she said. He hid it. My uncle feared losing his place among the council if an outsider proved himself worthy. He wanted the trial to end in death. The crowd erupted. Warriors surrounded Nolan as he backed away, his defiance turning to desperation. You would believe a woman bewitched by a stranger, he spat, but it was too late. Truth had already taken root. Tazi lifted the silver talisman into the sunlight. The polished metal caught the fire's reflection, glowing like molten glass. "The spirits have judged," he declared. "This man," he turned toward Royce, "has walked the shadow path and returned with a clean heart. The liar stands before us." Nolan tried to flee, but the warriors seized him. His protests faded beneath the wind's howl. Carried off into the vast silence of the desert, Royce fell to his knees, exhaustion washing over him. Kiona ran to him, wrapping her arms around his shoulders. The tribe watched in silence, not with anger now, but with reverence. Tazi stepped closer, placing a hand on Royce's head. "From this day, you are no longer an outsider. You are Dehisi, one who walks into worlds." The drums began again, slow, powerful, ancient. As the sun dipped behind the horizon, the fire burned brighter than ever. The tribe danced around it, voices rising in song. Kiona and Royce stood together, hand in hand. The glow of the flames reflected in their eyes. The desert wind carried their story far into the canyons, the story of love that defied law, and truth that burned brighter than fear. Days passed since the trial, yet the fire of that moment still burned within the camp. The tribe had returned to its rhythm, the pounding of drums at sunset, the laughter of children chasing shadows between the tents, the smell of smoke and roasted maize drifting through the wind. But something had changed. Where once Royce Barrett had been the outsider, now he was spoken of in whispers of respect. Men greeted him by name, women offered him water and bread. Even the children followed in, tracing the strange patterns of his beard with curious hands. But it was Kiona who saw the deeper change, the quiet that had settled inside him. The man who had once carried the restlessness of the frontier now moved with the calm of the desert itself. One evening, as the sky bled into crimson and violet, Royce sat beside the sacred fire with Tazi. The elder's eyes reflected the flames. "Weary but wise. You walked the path few among us could survive," Tazi said. "You saw the truth that hides behind fear. That is what makes a man one of us, not his blood, but his courage to face what lies within." Royce nodded. "I came here to trade, to earn. But she," he looked toward Kiona, who was tending to the children near the tents. "She taught me what worth really means." The elder smiled faintly. "And what will you do now, Dehisi? The one who walks into worlds must choose his path carefully." Royce stared into the fire, the heat warming his face. "I will stay," he said at last, "not as a guest, not as a traitor, but as a man who serves this land." Tazi's voice dropped lower. "Then remember, the desert gives, but it also tests. The peace you feel now must be guarded. Others beyond the hills will not understand what has happened here." That night, the stars shimmered like silver dust scattered across the sky. Kiona joined him by the fire, resting her head against his shoulder. They sat in silence, the world around them humming with life. "You think they'll ever truly see you as one of them?" she asked quietly. Royce smiled. "Maybe not all, but I don't need all. I just need you." She laughed softly, her fingers brushing against his hand. "You always speak like a story." "Maybe that's what we are," he said. "A story no one will believe." The fire cracked, sending a small spark into the night air, rising, glowing, then fading into darkness. The peace did not last long. 3 nights after the celebration, a rider appeared at the edge of the camp, his horse trembling, its flanks caked in dust. The man wore a blue coat, torn and sun-bleached, the remnants of a soldier's uniform. When he slid from the saddle, the tribe surrounded him, wary but silent. Royce stepped forward. "Who are you?" The man's lips were cracked, his eyes wild with exhaustion. "Name's Colton Reeves," he rasped. "The army's coming. Today's south, they're moving toward the river valley. Said there's a settlement here. Said it's harboring thieves and deserters." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. Taji's face hardened. "They come with weapons." Colton nodded. "And orders. They're clearing every camp they find. The commander thinks you're hiding someone." His gaze flicked toward Royce. A heavy silence followed. Fiona's heart thudded painfully. "They'll kill everyone," she whispered. "Men, women." Royce clenched his fists. He knew that commander, a man named Briggs, ruthless, ambitious, the kind who saw treaties as obstacles. "They won't stop," he said. "Not until this place is ash." Tazi turned to him. "Then what do you suggest, Dehisi?" Royce looked around, at the women gathering their children, at the men sharpening spears, at the sacred fire flickering between them. "We prepare," he said, "not to run, but to stand." Night fell heavy and red that evening. The camp moved with quiet urgency. Fires burned low to hide their glow. Warriors painted their faces in streaks of black and white. Fiona stood beside Royce, tying a strip of cloth around his arm, the mark of the Apache defenders. "You shouldn't fight," she whispered. "They'll see your face. They'll know you're one of them." Royce met her eyes. "Then they'll know the truth they refuse to see." Before dawn, he climbed the ridge above the valley. From there, he could already see dust clouds in the distance, the slow, relentless crawl of soldiers across the desert floor. The rising sun painted their bayonets in streaks of gold and blood. Royce stood tall, wind whipping through his hair, his shadow stretching long behind him across the red earth. The drums began below, slow, steady, echoing across the canyon walls. He whispered, almost to himself, "Let them come." And with that, he turned back toward the camp, toward the people who had become his home, his family, his purpose. The war for peace had begun. The dawn broke red and slow, spilling light across the ridges like blood. From the high cliffs, Royce watched the army form its lines in the valley below. Blue coats moving in rhythm, rifles glinting like rows of mirrors. The drums from the Apache camp echoed up the canyon, deep and steady, a heartbeat of defiance. Smoke from their fires coiled into the pale morning sky. Royce turned to the warriors beside him, men painted in earth tones, their eyes calm and sharp. He saw no fear, only resolve. Tazi stood at the front, holding a staff wrapped in eagle feathers. "We do not fight to kill," he said quietly. "We fight to be remembered." Royce nodded, gripping the bow that had been given to him days before, its wood smooth and dark, carved with symbols of the tribe. He was no longer the merchant who once traded glass for silver. He was a protector now. When the first gunshot cracked through the valley, it shattered the silence like lightning. A plume of dust rose where the bullet struck rock. Then came another, and another. The warriors scattered across the ridges, answering with arrows that hissed through the air like whispers. The soldiers below shouted, disoriented by the echoes that bounced from every wall. Royce crouched behind a stone outcrop, firing again and again, each arrow finding its mark. The air filled with smoke, gunfire, and the raw cry of men. Fiona watched from the camp below, heart pounding with every shot. She moved among the wounded, pressing cloth to bleeding shoulders, whispering prayers under her breath. Then, a scream tore through the canyon. Tazi had fallen. Royce saw it happen, the old man struck by a bullet near the heart, the staff slipping from his hand. Rage surged through him like fire. He leapt from cover, sprinting down the slope through dust and gunfire. Bullets tore the ground around him. But he didn't stop. He reached Tazi, dropped to his knees, and pressed a trembling hand to the elder's chest. Tazi's eyes flickered open. His lips moved, barely forming words. "Do not fight with anger. Fight with purpose." And then his breath stilled. The drums faltered. For a moment, everything went quiet, the kind of silence that comes before the earth itself decides to move. Royce rose slowly, gripping the fallen staff. All around him, warriors turned their heads. The fire in their eyes mirrored his own. He lifted the staff high, shouting with all his strength, not in English, but in the tongue Fiona had taught him, "For the land, for our people." The canyon roared to life again. The battle raged through the valley like a storm with no sky. Smoke hung heavy in the air, the scent of powder mixing with the dry heat of sand and sweat. Royce led the warriors down from the ridge. The elder's staff clutched in his hands like a banner of fire. Bullets whined past his head. He dove behind a fallen log, returning fire with arrows until his quiver was empty. Round him, the cries of men and the thunder of hooves merged into one endless roar. From below, he saw Kiona running through the chaos, dragging a wounded boy out of the open. The sun caught her hair, turning it to gold against the smoke. For a heartbeat, everything slowed, the sound faded, the world paused. Then a rifle cracked, and the sand exploded near her feet. Royce's heart seized. He broke into a sprint, vaulting over rocks and bodies. He reached her just as another shot tore through the air, grazing his arm, spinning him halfway around. "Go," he shouted, pulling her behind a wagon. "You have to get to the canyon." Tears streaked her dust-covered face. "Not without you." Royce shook his head, pressing the staff into her hands. "If anything happens, give this to the council. Tell them Taji's spirit walks with the people now." Before she could protest, a blast ripped through the valley. A cannon, small but deadly, had fired from the soldiers' flank, tearing into the ridge. Debris rained down like fire. Royce turned, spotting the crew reloading. He didn't think, he ran. He sprinted through smoke and sand, picking up a fallen rifle. The world around him blurred, the screams, the gunfire, the wind. Only the target ahead remained. He dove forward, tackling the first soldier. The two rolled in the dust, fighting for control of the weapon. Royce slammed the man's arm against the ground until the rifle went off, the bullet tearing into the sky. Another soldier swung a bayonet. Royce dodged, countered, and drove his shoulder into the man's chest, sending him sprawling into the fire pit. Then silence. The cannon crew lay still. The battlefield, for the first time, began to quiet. When he looked up, the soldiers were retreating, blue coats vanishing into the desert haze. The valley slept for the first time in days. The smoke had thinned, the drums had faded, and the wind, once filled with screams, now whispered softly through the sagebrush. Royce woke to the pale light of dawn slipping across the earth. His body ached with the dull weight of survival. Round him, the camp stirred, quiet voices, footsteps, the sound of rebuilding. Children carried buckets of water from the river. Women mended torn hides and tended the wounded. The world was fragile again, like glass newly cooled from fire. Kiona knelt beside him, wrapping a fresh bandage around his arm. Her eyes were heavy with exhaustion, but her hands were steady. "You didn't sleep," he said quietly. "Neither did you," she answered. A faint smile touched her lips. "But you're still breathing. That's enough for now." Royce looked toward the horizon, where the soldiers had disappeared, leaving only broken wheels and scattered footprints. "They'll come back," he said. "Maybe not soon, but they'll always come back." Kiona followed his gaze. "Then we'll be ready. The land remembers those who protect it." Later that day, the council gathered beneath the shade of the red rock cliffs. The sacred staff, once Taji's, stood planted in the ground, its feathers swaying in the warm wind. Royce approached with Kiona at his side. The elders watched in silence, their faces unreadable. An old woman spoke first. "You bled for this land, though it was not your own. You fought beside us, though you could have fled. What is it you ask now, Dehisi?" Royce hesitated. "I ask for nothing. Only to stay, to live as one of you, to learn as I still must." The elder nodded slowly. "And the world beyond these hills, it will not forget your name. Men will come searching. Then let them," he said. "They'll find nothing but the desert. And maybe that's enough." There was a pause. Then another elder stepped forward, the youngest among them, carrying Taji's memory in his eyes. "Then it is decided," he said. "The man who walked into worlds now belongs to both." He pressed his hand to Royce's chest, just above the heart. "The fire that once burned against us now burns for us." Kiona's eyes filled with quiet pride. As the sun fell behind the ridge, the tribe gathered for the first peaceful fire since the battle. Songs rose again, not of mourning, but of return. Royce sat beside Kiona, the glow of the flames reflected in their faces. For the first time, he felt the weight of belonging, not because he had earned it, but because he had finally stopped running. Weeks passed, and the desert began to heal. Charred brush gave way to green shoots. The river, once red with dust and ash, ran clear again under the morning sun. Life, as it always did, returned quietly. Royce worked beside the others, gathering stone, repairing the broken fences, helping rebuild what had been torn apart. But his heart was no longer heavy. Each sunrise no longer meant survival. It meant purpose. Sometimes he would ride to the high cliffs at dusk and watch the horizon. Beyond the far hills lay the world he'd once known, the towns, the trade posts, the hunger for gold. It all seemed small now, like a dream from another life. Tiona often joined him there, silent, her gaze fixed on the same fading light. One evening she asked, "If you could go back to the life before me, before all this, would you?" Royce smiled, his eyes never leaving the horizon. "No," he said softly. "That man died the day I crossed this valley." She leaned her head on his shoulder. "Then we'll stay. We'll build what they tried to burn." The seasons turned. The stories spread. Travelers who passed through the valley spoke of a man with a foreign face and Apache eyes, a man who walked between two fires and lived. They said he and the woman of the tribe guarded the sacred ground, where the wind carried songs instead of gunfire. Years later, when strangers came again to the desert, prospectors, soldiers, men who sought what they could never understand, they found only a stone circle near the cliffs. At its center stood a weathered staff, its feathers long turned pale with time. And when the evening wind rose, it whispered to names, faint, almost lost among the dunes. Royce, Tiona. Some said they had gone to live beyond the ridges, where the stars touched the earth. Others swore their spirits still watched over the valley. But for those who listened closely, the truth was simpler. They had become part of the land itself, not outsiders, not ghosts, but the living memory of what love can build when war tries to tear it apart. As the last light of dusk faded, the desert glowed with quiet fire. The story that began with a man tied before a tribe ended, with two souls bound by something greater than blood, by belonging. And the wind, ever faithful, carried their promise across the endless sands. Love does not conquer the world. It becomes it.